think the number one is there's less leverage for the employee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because there's more people out looking for work, right? So there's more accountants, more graphic artists, more marketing people, more this, more that, right? And so what does that do? That means that your job could be gold, right?
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, especially for young people, and a lot of people listening can understand this, is they would job hop like every year. Like they get a job for 6 months, get a new job, be paid a lot more, and you couldn't blame them for doing it. It was just a job market that us that were a little older just never had seen before because we're used to staying at our jobs, and not wanting to job hop because it doesn't look good on the resume. And you had a lot of that. And you also had people, they would get a job, and you had an assistant that did this. They started to work for us for like 3 months, and all of a sudden they wanted a 70% raise to stay on for
I
month
know.
4. And so, some of that stuff was pretty wild. But now, and this is going to be really hard for young people to start to wrap their head around. The rest of us, it just feels normal. But it's a hard time to find a job, and you're not going to see the wage increases that you've been seeing because there's so many applicants for every job. So that gives that employer the power again, and it also makes the employee have to really prove themselves in order to, keep their job and get promoted.
Yeah, we're going to go over a chart in a minute here and talk about what we see in the chart, but this all shifted from about 2018.
Yeah.
And we'll show you this. And there's an anomaly in the middle of it during this pandemic. But the reality was, or is, I should say, the employees have they've been able to kind of control stuff personally. I know there was a time where we were trying to advertise for certain positions, and they're just really, really difficult candidates to try to find, because when the unemployment rate is low, there's not as many applicants. And to your point, the resumes that we got, people are putting 8 months here, 1 year here, 6 months here. I mean, it's on a resume. Like, those are that was something you would never do, or a gap, right? Like
Yeah.
a gap between, like, well, what happened, between this year and that year? Well, I went and found myself in Costa Rica.
Yeah, we,
Like,
we just took off for a year.
Right.
Or we did our van trip or whatever. And, a lot of people too, like we were still hiring those people, and they would stay with us for 6 or 8 months and then they would leave and get a better job somewhere else. And that was just the normal, but we had to hire them because there wasn't that many candidates. We might have 3 candidates on a job that we had to have filled. So you have to hire people that were job hopping. And now, what the employers are seeing is like, we can be selective. We put up a job, we have 100 applicants within a couple of days, and we can find a great person through that.
So now let's take a look at the chart here. There's 2 lines. The line to the far left, if you can imagine, are the number of people unemployed, and then the one at the bottom is just merely time. And so this chart starts at 2001. But you can clearly see in the great financial crisis in 2007, when the blue line, the job opening blue line, went straight down from in 07, obviously, right? Because you're going through the GFC, and then what went straight up was the red line, more people unemployed than job openings, okay? So that's clear. The GFC created this huge bubble on this chart right in the middle. Then it crossed in 2018. And that's actually when things got really interesting, because during that period of time prior to that, guys, what happened? Now, trust me, employers were not in great shape during this time either, but there's a lot of people looking for work. And so there were lots of stuff. There was lots of things that went on during this period of time, but the employers kind of had their say during this period of time as well, right? Now, there's other things that matter during this period of time. There's interest rates, there's inflation, there's all that kind of stuff, and we'll get to that in a minute. But then what happened is the total job openings spiked up again in 2021. So more jobs open than people
Well, and it's a
unemployed.
big difference. Like
Yeah.
2021, there is a lot more jobs than there are job openings.
Correct, right? And so, again, another bubble. And this was that period of time where we had, remember that employee that said, I want a 70%,
Yeah.
I want a 70% increase after 3 months. And, he was doing a great job, but 70%, come on. And the reason is he had power out in the marketplace. And I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah, and I think you have to understand why that happened. So, right after COVID, people were home. savings rates were at an all-time high. People were getting that stimulus money and they didn't have anywhere to spend it because most people couldn't leave the house. So they were, just sitting there at home wondering what to do. And so employers were hiring more people to fit that need. So more people were buying online, more people were in Phoenix, even just going out to eat more. Like, people had a lot of time on their hands because they didn't have to be in the office and money was being spent. And I think that shows that based on how many people were being hired, because if you look at the hiring rate, it's way higher than any other time previous to that.
Yeah. So if you go to the far end of the chart here, it's basically there are 0.09 jobs for every job seeker. And that's essentially, so there's 7.8 million people unemployed, but the job openings are 7.1 million. And I think that's actually where we're headed, right?
So then, as those jobs spiked in 22, slowly since then, that line has been going down. So there's been less available jobs. And if you can also see job seekers is also ticking up. So right now, just recently, that line has crossed. And what that means is there are less jobs than there are job seekers. And as Ken had said, there are 0.9 jobs right now for every job seeker looking. Now, we haven't had that since 2018. So it's an important statistic. And you have to look at why too, right? And I think that the why is the interesting part behind it.
Yeah, and I think the first thing is that if you look at the blue line as it spikes down to 2020, there was an overhiring. Remember that? Mm-hmm. So from 2020 to call it 2022, there was a lot of hiring. Now, part of that was post-pandemic, right? So you got to throw a dart in that one. But there was an over hiring during that period of time. Also rates, and why are interest rates important? And I'll just give you one example. So when inflation hit 9.1%, I think it was June of 2022, the Feds started reacting with this higher rates. And so the construction, like for my industry, multifamily stopped, home building stopped. A lot of people financing stuff stopped. The whole auto purchases stopped. Anything that was being financed, obviously, or a lot of things that were being financed, pulled back. And I think that's important to understand because, on one construction project, I'll go out there, there'll be 200, 300, 400 people working at one project, right? All working in different trades. And so interest rates do have, now obviously I'm just talking about construction and I'm just talking about real estate, but low interest rates do help this a lot. And I think, it's very interesting with this buy down of the mortgage-backed securities, from the Fannie and Freddie Mac that we're starting to see that Trump's talking about, could really be interesting because if rates go down, it could unlock a whole bunch of, new employment, right? And I would guess that low rates are going to create more employment.
Yeah, but I think we need to, look at the economy now for what it is and why this is happening, because I think a lot of people freak out when they see that there's more job seekers than there are jobs. And there's part of this that is concerning and part of this that is not concerning. And I think the biggest thing to note is that over time, there is usually more job seekers than there are jobs. That is a normal. We've been in an abnormal time the last, 6 or 7 years. This is very normal for there to be more job seekers than jobs. Yeah.
And it's going back to what you and I are used to. So once again, we were just talking offline, if you've been through this, we're actually heading back to the norm, kind of like with interest rates. We talk a lot about, people had this interesting little run with really, really